Fáilte. Welcome to the Village Oak Tree. I'm your host, Terrance Ó Domhnaill, and thank you again for joining me this week. This week, I have a wide range of news stories from Gaza, Cuba, Africa, Australia, Canada, and the U.S., the central point being the U.S. All of these stories have one common thread: the United States, which, as usual, is causing chaos all over the planet by way of its senile president. So gather around, sit you down somewhere comfortable for a bit while I make an attempt to put all this in perspective for everyone. I'll try not to take up too much of your time this week with all these stories I found. Mostly, I want to put this all together to show everyone that we're living in rapidly changing times. It's only going to get worse as these changes cause massive disruptions across the globe. The old world order is making way for the new multipolar world, where great powers are being forced to give way to lesser powers as geopolitics is beginning to equalize everywhere. The downside to this sort of progress is that some great powers don't want to give up their hegemony and are actively fighting these changes any way they can, usually with great violence, as we're seeing all across the world. I'm pointing a finger directly at the United States right now. For the last several decades, since the early 1990s, the U.S. has enjoyed a sense of being the big kid at the top of the snow pile and looking down at the rest of the world as its vassals. They use their military and economic might to force other nations around the world to capitulate or suffer the consequences, especially right now under Donald Trump. The list of nations and people who suffer consequences from the gangster state is too long to list here in this short episode, but we all pretty much know who they are. They've all been in the news through the years. Currently, and when I say currently, I mean within the last 5 years, we've been witnesses to genocides and ethnic cleansings in Gaza and the Sudan because of global greed, mostly to appease the United States. Why do you think certain Gulf states supported the warring factions in Sudan and Sahel regions of Africa? Why do you think certain European countries are still doing clandestine operations in Central Africa? Why is the U.S. now going after the Americas? It's because the planet's ecosystems are changing, which is causing shortages of the basics like food and water in certain regions. With these changing ecosystems caused by man-made global warming, there is more and more conflict taking shape to control the planet's resources, which has enriched the morbidly wealthy for decades, but is now starting to become harder to acquire without government intervention. African countries are throwing off the oppressive yokes of European and Western colonialism and imperialism to forge their own paths now, albeit rocky ones as they figure things out, but they're making good progress in some places. I expect they'll get better in time as long as they're left alone. Which brings us to the Middle East. Everyone on the planet knows about the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza by the Israelis. After over 2 years now, things are only getting worse because all of the developed world has been afraid of Israel and its superpower enablers, the US and EU for most part. Although with Trump, his only interest is how he can turn all that beachfront property into a luxury resort area for the world's morbidly wealthy. He could care less about any Palestinians. They're in the way of this new resort. The Israelis, on the other hand, want all that real estate for themselves in order for the Zionist settlers to take over. The wealthy Israelis, especially Netanyahu, want the oil underneath and off the coast. And that's causing a rift between Trump and the Israelis at the moment. Israelis aren't too keen on the U.S. taking over all those oil fields in exchange for lease payments and a small cut of the profits. The United States is also going through a massive political shift. It has been for a while now because of the ever increasing wealth gap, which Trump and company are exasperating by huge amounts, as if trying to fast track the U.S. into a one-party authoritarian government. The news stories are rife with commentary that Trump is heavily influenced by such strong men presidents as Putin, Kim Jong-un, Viktor Orban, and others. Or Russia's FSB, who used to be the KGB, who may have some compromise on Trump that could ruin his political life, which I think the Epstein scandal is doing the work for them. If I had to guess, this likely has something to do with Trump's penchant for raping underage girls in the past, most of which was happening while he was best buddies with the late Jeffrey Epstein, which he's tried to deny. I think that ship sailed a long time ago. So imagine if stupid Trump got caught in a KGB honey trap back in the old days when he was in charge of the beauty pageants in Moscow and other USSR satellite countries back when he could still get it up. As many journalists have written about, especially lately, this is a very plausible scenario, especially since he married two foreign born wives who came from former satellite USSR countries back in the day. The latest trove of Epstein files are bringing to light that a lot of world movers and shakers everywhere in the Western world and other places have been compromised in what is beginning to look like a worldwide network of honeypot traps set up by Epstein and company, who may have been working for the Israeli Mossad and the KGB. The jury is still out on the KGB connection, but there are hints in some of the latest files. Heads are rolling everywhere now, especially in France and Britain, over the cozy relationships with the world's biggest pimp. Not so much in the US yet, but that may change. I have another great article by the existential Republican about how the states could prosecute all the American elites who were involved with Epstein's honeypot blackmail schemes, including Trump. Moving on from the Epstein files, Trump has effectively set up a blockade of Cuba, virtually starving them into submission. Mexico has vowed to try and send food and basic aid, but no fuel to keep the lights on yet. Mexico is still wary of Trump getting mad and increasing tariffs, sending troops across the border, or other economic sanctions. They will tread cautiously for now. I personally think they should try and sneak past the economic blockade myself. If they do it, maybe other neighboring countries will help also. Will Trump try to go after every other island or South American country that dares to defy him? He says he will, but can he? I have a story from Russia saying that they're going to do all they can to help Cuba. I wonder what that might look like. It's also beginning to look like Trump's military-industrial complex may be thinking hard about reneging on the AUKUS deal they made with Britain and Australia. According to this article, the U.S. is rethinking about the deal to make Virginia-class subs in American shipyards. The excuse is they don't trust the Aussies to side with them if the U.S. goes to war with China. So the U.S. wants to keep its submarines and operate them out of Australian ports. In effect, take over Australian naval bases for American use. Seems the Aussie government is afraid of Trump these days. Maybe it's time they and the rest of the world grow a set of balls and make decisions based on their citizens' best interest rather than Trump's interest. Canada is, so is the EU, sort of. They're just a little slower than the Canadians. I have a story about how the EU is replacing American tech with their own and replacing Visa and MasterCard with their own systems as they don't trust the Americans anymore. I wonder why not. The Australians are notably upset about this as they really want to have their own submarines. The British are largely silent so far. In this article, they speculate that it may be because the Americans lack the ability to make new ships and submarines for themselves anymore, much less for anyone else. But they don't want anyone to really know about that. Meanwhile, Canada has companies from two different countries vying to set up submarine building and maintenance facilities on both coasts to make submarines for the Canadian Navy. Canada is also trying to decide which fighter jets to manufacture and procure. The clear winner is the Swedish Gripen model, which is designed to operate in Arctic weather, which the American F-35 is not so much. Some latest news from yesterday, it looks like Canada is being coerced into buying 14 more American F-35s on top of the 16 they've already agreed to. In this article I found in CBC News, Ottawa is trying to keep it out of the public eye, but since I found it, the cat's out of the bag. I don't know how many Canadians will be up in arms about this. Well, they're starting to. In today's news, there's more and more coming out about this. So I offer a counter to all of this. What if countries that have been coerced into buying American weaponry decide not to give in to these monster tactics anymore? Or because they're worried that the U.S. will fail to keep their deals, start buying from other, more reliable countries? What if Australia gets tired of dealing with the fickle Yanks and do what the Canadians are thinking hard about doing, buying submarines from Germany or South Korea. If they do, would the Yanks try to force the Aussies into more bad deals using economic sanctions? We all should know by now that this is Trump's MO. The question for the Aussies is whether their current government has the stones to stand up for themselves against Trump and his military industrial complex. Talking about corruption some more, I want to share a thought for you. Most of us remember the Trump raid in Caracas, Venezuela last January to abduct Maduro and his wife. I asked myself the other day why, after all the hype from Maduro before the U.S. commandos captured him about his air defenses, why weren't any U.S. aircraft shot down that night? I mean, they should have at least taken out one or two Blackhawks, do you think? Yet, the Americans only suffered seven or eight wounded, and they killed over 80 Venezuelan and Cuban security forces. My question is this: did the vice president, now new president, Delcy Rodriguez, know this was coming ahead of time and tell the air defense teams to stand down? Maybe for the promise of a political payday? The United States, there are more and more stories coming out about how the Trump paramilitary Gestapo is hurting and killing immigrants during apprehensions and detentions. I've talked about the bad food and overcrowding in these camps before, but now I want to address the beatings that are taking place across the country for no reason other than they can. It appears to be out of racism and a sense of power, which Trump is promoting openly with his social media platform. Most egregious example, which came out last week. And I'm talking about that video that everybody's still going on about regarding the Obamas. Then there's this story of naked greed by a real estate development company that figured out a way to get rid of the immigrant squatters in a building in South Chicago. Call ICE and have them clean out the non-paying renters for them by lying to the feds about who was there, such as telling ICE that there were cartel members there. They've been caught and are being prosecuted, but the damage to the immigrant community is beyond repair now. How many other greedy Americans are scamming ICE to get rid of their immigrant problems? Not that I think ICE is blameless in all of this, but there was no reason to waste taxpayer money on a warrantless military raid with troops rappelling out of helos onto rooftops and busting down doors without investigating first. This just shows everyone the pattern of white supremacy racism that permeates American culture and has since the first slaves arrived from the Caribbean to Virginia in 1621. Trump put that on full display last week with that social media video and meme of the Obamas, which will blow over like the rest in a few days without anyone actually doing something about it. In any other institution, private or public, the perpetrator would be fired immediately and maybe even sued in court for libel and defamation. But the U.S. doesn't have any DEI initiatives anymore because of Trump. So he and anyone else like his paramilitary will continue to get away with it for now until we, the people, decide to grow some cojones and stand up to Trump and his paramilitary before it's too late, before he strips away free and fair elections by November. I'll leave you with all this to think about as I take my break now. When I return, I want to read something from an Australian named Caitlin Johnstone. She nailed it last Sunday with this post I want to share. During this break, I want to take a couple of minutes to explain how you can support this podcast, mainly through my website at coronabeha.com. First, let me say I don't initially paywall my Substack podcasts and articles for the first 30 days, but I do accept donations of any amount in most currencies using the donation page on my website, which viewers can visit using the QR code at the top left of me here. The website is also listed at the bottom of this video. If you're listening to an audio version of the podcast episode, use the link in the podcast description. And once you get past the intro page, and let me scroll over here and walk you through, you get to the home page, a little information about me and a Google Translator here at the top of the page. And on the menu bar at the top, there's a blog section. I write articles about anything I'm thinking about at any given time. You can find them here. I try to publish on social media. I do this here because I don't want to have to worry about censorship from the tech companies. Then there's a photography section, which I have here, which shows pictures from all over the world from my days of traveling everywhere. I've got current photos of all my misadventures from my younger days. Then there's an online store where you can purchase my books, my son's books. There's arrows. You can scroll through the different things that we'll have for sale here. You can get an idea what this looks like. And then there's another pages at the top. This is where you can go and you can see previous podcasts. There's a little bit of bio. And then here's my donations page. Now, if there's any questions, I have set up several methods for visitors to reach out to me directly. You can go here to the contact page. And there's also, if you've got a technical question, you can use this little icon here at the bottom right. There's social media links, you name it. You can find me any way you want. So I hope people watching or listening to the podcast or reading the commentary will take a moment and come visit me at crownofbeha.com. I might even have something you like and you'll want to come back for more. Sláinte. Welcome back. So let me go over here and I'll pull up Miss Johnstone's article. And I'm just going to show you the title. I'm going to actually read this. I did reach out to her and ask her if I could. I haven't heard back, but as she's pretty popular, I'm not surprised. So I'm going to go ahead and read this because generally she doesn't pay well this stuff. So it's the title, If You Think Our Rulers Do Bad Things in Secret, Wait Till You See What They Do Out in the Open by Caitlin Johnstone. This is February 8th. Now she writes a Substack newsletter pretty much every day. And it's co-authored by her husband, reading by Tim Foley. They usually do a YouTube reading here. So if you're into sarcastic, somewhat biting politics, she primarily focuses on Gaza and the Palestinians for almost everything she does. So if you're interested, subscribe. They launched a live stream genocide in full view of the entire world. They're openly targeting civilian populations with siege warfare in Iran and Cuba in full view of the entire world. They openly kidnapped the president of a sovereign nation in full view of the entire world. They deliberately provoked a horrific and dangerous proxy war in Ukraine in full view of the entire world. They spent years actively backing Saudi Arabia's monstrous genocide atrocities in Yemen in full view of the entire world. They're plundering and exploiting the resources and labor of the global south in full view of the entire world. They're killing the biosphere we all depend on for their own enrichment in full view of the entire world. They're circling the globe with hundreds of military bases to secure planetary domination in full view of the entire world. They engage in nuclear brinkmanship and wave around Armageddon weapons like pistols in full view of the entire world. People go homeless and die of exposure, while billionaires buy private islands and choose the next president in full view of the entire world. Weapons manufacturers lobby for wars and then profit from the death and destruction they cause in full view of the entire world. The President of the United States has repeatedly admitted to being bought and owned by the world's richest Israeli in full view of the entire world. The U.S. Treasury Secretary has been repeatedly admitting that the U.S. deliberately sparked the violence and unrest in Iran by methodically immiserating the population via economic warfare in full view of the entire world. I keep seeing people freaking out and asking how it's possible that the individuals in the Epstein files haven't been arrested for their secret nefarious behavior. I always want to ask them, mate, have you ever seen the nefarious behavior they're engaging in right out in the open? Pay attention to the Epstein files. Pay attention to what little we learn about how these freaks conduct themselves behind closed doors. By all means, pay close attention to these things. but don't forget to also pay attention to the far greater evils they're inflicting in full view of the entire world. So that's all I have for you this week. Gurma Haggett, thank you for watching and listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed it. You'll return again to listen to me offer a voice to what a lot of people are thinking these days. To say goodbye this week, I wish to repeat an Irish quote from the rebellion days. In the heart of every rebel, there lies a spark of hope that refuses to be extinguished. Slán go foill.